Hello everybody, good morning and welcome to our talk for today called Tracing Transitions, examining the human experience, space and identity through the lens of this incredible Emirati artist, Lamya Gargash. Lamya, welcome.
Hi, Karishma.
A little introduction. Lamya Gargash is an Emirati artist and a mother of four. She was the first artist to represent the UAE in its debut at the Venice Biennale in 2009. She studied at the American University of Sharjah, followed by a master's in visual communication at the Central St. Martin's in London. Lamya is heavily inspired by uninhabited and abandoned spaces, as we can see from the photos there, as well as the cultural heritage in the context of rapid change. There are so many notable shows and prizes that have been won. I'm just going to mention a few. There's the Sawa and the Isthmus exhibitions at the Third Line Gallery here in Dubai. Her pieces have been featured at the Jameel Art Center. Her artwork belongs to the permanent collection at the Burjeel Art Foundation and the Sharjah Art Foundation. Lamya has participated in major film festivals. She also does film, such as the Locarno Film Festival and the Dubai International Film Festival. She has just been nominated by the Louvre Abu Dhabi for the Art Here Richard Mille Prize for 2024. And I can't believe she's here because her show opens next week. So please welcome her.
That was a very nice introduction.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad I got it right.
You got it right.
So Lamya, let's start with your journey as an artist.
Okay.
How did it happen? Did you think it was viable? Did you face any resistance along the way?
Well, my dad wanted me to be a banker. And I think for a very long time, that's what he told people. But I come from a very conservative family. We lived in a compound all together. My parents, my grandparents, my great-grandmother, and my uncle. So we lived in a very tight-knit community, and the expectation was obviously education was important, but then marriage is kind of like the icing on the cake. So
do you want to spell first? Yeah.
So I think for a very long time I thought I would be in the corporate world. I actually didn't want to do photography because I was always told I took bad pictures. So on family trips, I was never the one taking pictures. It was my sister. So when I started foundation year at college, I tried to get away from my photography classes, but I had to do them, and I ended up doing all of them at that point. But still, at that point, I wasn't convinced that I could do photography as a career or art as a career. I still felt like I needed to venture into more of a corporate environment. So I applied for my master's, and then I tried to shift from the photography program to the digital media and mapping.
Couldn't get away.
I couldn't get away. They put me back in photography. My instructor at that point was like, I was really young, but he said he really, it affected me. He's like, I think people can learn from you. I'm like, really? I was young and I think impressionable, but I stayed, and I'm so glad I stayed. It was.
So when did you have the realization that, oh my God, I am an artist? Was it the Venice Biennale when you were selected to represent? And how did that help shape your career?
I think the term artist is so loosely used these days because every person I meet is always, they're always addressing themselves as artists. So I joined the gallery back in 2000, Third Line Gallery back in 2006, just as I was leaving to England. I had no idea what it was to be part of a gallery, with the idea of curating, the idea of being represented. So I actually, it was a learning curve for me. I still thought in my mind I would be taking more of a corporate job and that art would be a side thing, as you're conditioned to believe that, creativity, anything you love really should be a pastime and not a career. So that's the kind of mentality I still grew up with. And I still think till the last decade, I wasn't convinced of being, I still, in my mind was kind of like feeling a little, not less than, but it was just the idea of acknowledging what I do and validating. I no longer require external validation. I am very happy doing what I want. And art has always been something that but it's taken a lot of 2 decades of my life to get to this point of just fully accepting it.
So the criticism, and especially given your background, how did you handle it?
My sister used to get the praises because she studied political science and economics, and she's, she works for the foreign ministry. I get a pat on the back. So I get asked to do weddings and kids' parties. And, I had to kind of try and explain to people the work that I did. Or the work that I do is more of archiving, and it's fine art photography. So there's a difference between fine art and commercial, and people didn't understand that. So I was always getting people trying to push for me to do more corporate projects, and it just
Clearly. So basically, you are capturing the human narrative in spaces without the human beings there.
Yes.
And that's what fascinates you.
Yes.
And you take from your Emirati heritage to do that. Can you talk a little bit more about that process? Why does it mean so much to you? And what is the creative process of doing that?
I think it was my home, because we lived in a family compound for so many years, and when we left, my parents left their house. And then, it's just basically a few steps away. They're all very close to each other. So I remember flying back from the UK and asking them if they've been inside. And they're like, no. And I was so interested. And I had my 35mm at that point. And I just went into my house and I started taking pictures. And then I realized that there was something there. I love the idea of culture evolving within. I love the idea of intimacy as well. And this idea that I had to constantly, people have these stereotypes about Dubai being so glitzy and glamorous. And I didn't grow up with that. I grew up with Sheikh Zayed being like complete desert. I grew up with the first mall opening up, which was Al Ghurair. I remember the dial, on the phone, and a Rolodex.
Love those phones.
So for me, it's like I felt like I was so defensive and I wasn't able to vocalize it. And I think this work brought that to life. So I did a study on Emirati homes, and that was my thesis for the work. And then I published my thesis as a book the following 2 years later. So I'm definitely interested in what spaces hold. I'm very much influenced by the works of Candida Hofer, who's a German photographer and does a lot of kind of documentation and archiving of spaces. And she talks about, again, the human narrative in space without having any people in them. And I also use film, so I'm very much an old soul at heart. And people have been like, why are you still shooting film when everyone else has gone digital? I still shoot film till this day. I have a fridge full of films. My husband's like, he opens the fridge and there's like boxes of Polaroids. But I just feel like it adds to the work as well, the idea of waiting and anticipating something, things not being so instant. And like my kids see me take a picture and they're like, Mama, can I see the image? I'm like, no, not for another week. And they just can't comprehend the idea that I have to get them processed and then get the negative scanned, and but I just love it. I love the idea of it.
So it's an analog camera that
I have so many right now. They're my love.
And clearly you've been recognized so much for your work, but in this sort of AI digital driven age, do you consistently see a place for that kind of work?
I do. There's definitely a big movement now. Everyone's kind of going back to film. It's a bit kitsch for some people, but for me, it's just been my whole 2 decades of my life has been that. I love the idea of things being manual and being able to touch things and rolling a film in. And depending on the camera that I use, I can go from shooting 10 images a roll to 12 to 14 to 36. So it really forces me to kind of engage with the space I'm in, kind of reflect as well, which is what I love. Because once I'm shooting, I'm just kind of in a different world altogether, rather than just take, thousands of shots and stuff. And I'm not against digital, but I think for my own fulfillment, I always have to shoot film, and digital is kind of secondary.
And I've seen pictures of you. You're with that little backpack of yours. Everywhere she goes, she has this backpack with her cameras. And she also has 4 children. So how does someone with 4 children have the energy to create art and get in the flow and do this to me it sounds quite cumbersome because I just get my photographs on my phone. How do you manage to do that?
I can't deny the fact that I have help. My mother is a big help as well. I have help at home, my in-laws. But I am very much I'm very much, very much invested with my kids' life. So because I work for myself, so I've learned to manage my time and also my guilt, which has been a big factor in my work. You know, the first few years after having my son, I just couldn't handle the guilt of leaving him. And now my kids have kind of grew up with me, and they understand that there are days when I won't be home, or there are days where I have to do this. And I have a little studio at home, so there are days where I'm like, do not enter.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's painting or illustrating, I also love to paint. So they have a good understanding, which makes me feel at ease. But I won't feel at ease knowing that I haven't done my part with them, be it homework, be it activities, be it, you know, we always have conversations, me and my kids. I love to be a part of their life. But again, it's definitely something that I have been working on, because it's not easy. You know, it's definitely, you know, again, we're conditioned to think that family comes first, and so on forth. But I do believe that as a person, you need to set priorities for yourself in order for you to be a better mom and spend quality time with your kids. And I'm all about quality. So, but it's hard. It's definitely not easy. But
right. So, if I could get a little personal, you mentioned the fact that you have your mom, you have your in-laws, you have a big family here. There is, Dubai is not the Dubai you grew up in.
No.
It's changed. You have so many expats here now. And there is sort of an expat life, and there's a local sort of Emirati life.
Right.
And, there is this kind of impression that, it must be so different and so easy to be an Emirati living in the UAE. To what extent do you feel like that's true? And I mean, in your own journey as an Emirati woman, can you possibly share?
Yeah, I actually would like to share that.
Okay.
Because I've always received it took me a long time to kind of validate. It took me a long time to be at peace with who I am and appreciate the work that I do, because I do work very, very, very hard. And I don't just say that for sake of, but I actually do. My kids see me lugging around my suitcases. I had a shoot in England this past summer for 2 months, and there were parts of the UK where there were no elevators, so we had to lug the luggage around town on stairs, because they're older buildings, right? A lot of these heritage sites don't. So, but I do it out of passion and out of love. So when I do get the odd person commenting, that it's easier. My parents were very strict when I grew up. I had to, in order for me to get lights, I needed studio lights. I remember I was gifted a few things for my birthday, and I had to sell them so that I can go buy my lights. Or I would, if I wanted a computer, then I would freelance on the side, and then I'd get the money for the computer. So my dad is very much a self-made man, and he really ingrained in me the idea that you really have to work hard for it. So so then it does obviously, affect me sometimes when people undermine what I do. But like I said, 20 years down the line, I'm at peace. I'm like, I know what I'm doing. I know my struggles as a woman, as a mother, as an Emirati, as a Muslim, there's so many labels you can attach to a person. And I think once you're at peace, knowing that you've done your best, I don't think anyone else matters really. And there is always going to be someone out there that's going to criticize what you do and have something to say. So it's part of growing up.
Are there any personal struggles that you have faced?
When I did a project on budget hotels in Dubai, so I found an online map. This was back in 2007, 2008. And basically it was a map of all the hotels in Dubai, and they were all back to back. Down in.
I didn't even know that we had so many.
So I wanted to kind of take it on as a project, which I ended up showing at the Venice Biennale. I was lugging around my family portraits and placing them in all these hotel rooms. The difficulty was obviously lugging around the equipment and getting people to, because they're like, why do you want to take pictures? I'm like, and I'd sometimes have people like the reception guy watching me in case I stole something. I don't know. So you do get watched. You do get the odd like, why do you need to photograph this? And they obviously try and show me a lot more fancier spaces, because obviously who would want, a bedroom, who would want, but for me, it's like, I just, getting people to understand what it is I do conceptually, it's been hard. Family members as well, getting into their homes, asking to document their spaces. They would be, I found that it was easier for me to take pictures of them but not their private quarters. It was this idea of opening up was not very, your private space is your private space,
Yeah.
You kind of, there's a limit drawn there. And other issues are obviously, like, I do a lot of commission work as well, so sometimes production fee can be a challenge. And again, physically, as women, not to say that women aren't strong, but physically there are a lot of physical things that I have to do, such as lugging around stuff, carrying things, I came back from this UK trip completely bruised. But it was it's a great sense when it comes to validation. I think it's a nice feeling.
Self-validation.
Yeah,
You don't need
yeah,
it,
you don't need it. Yeah, it's great.
That's incredible. And you've talked about, the compound you lived in, you've talked about your heritage. How do you feel about Dubai now? And how do you feel about the prospects for UAE artists, female artists in the UAE? Do you like what's happening? Do you like that it's become so glamorous, so Dubai bling?
I live on the other side of town. It's not glamorous, and I like it. It's very deserty. And I love the desert. So I try and include that a lot in my work. And I have a show coming up at Sharjah, at the Maraya Art Center in Sharjah. Yes. And that show is basically an ode to me, my culture, my being, my faith, my personality. But it's crossed over London and, UK and the UAE, and this idea of trying to show the other side, trying to show, because I get, what's it called? I'm in awe when I'm around Dubai as well. Certain parts of Dubai, I feel like a tourist because I don't venture from where I live in Al Khawanid, so it's quite like intimate. It's very residential, very family oriented. So when I do venture into town, I'm just like every other tourist out there, like, oh wow, what is this? But I'm a homebody, so I'm very much happy being home and even with, being in the desert. I love the desert. Like, that's just one of my things. When I want to shoot, I sometimes just go grab a camera, go to the desert. And I love things being authentic and real. I'm one of those people. So yeah, people do have a perception of what the city is like, but I think everyone does, really. Yeah. We all have different ways of looking at it because every part of Dubai is so different.
Yeah, it is. It is all perception. You talked about how your show in Sharjah is spanning to the UK now. Mm-hmm. And I think you've kind of moved away from just Dubai and you're trying to make connections with all these other sort of splurging metropolises. Can you talk about that? And why is it so important to you?
It's important because I think you kind of get comfortable at some point, and I wanted to push myself. So fear is a big part of what I do. Fear is a big part of my work. If I fear something, I know I have passion. So just a year and a half ago, I did this connection between Japan and Dubai. So I documented this very old, abandoned resort in Atami in Japan called the Aka Resort. And it was just, I was meeting with the curator and she's like, oh, you're really gonna love this hotel. I'm like, can I fly in to take pictures? And I did. And then I wanted to create a link between these two cities. In a way, I'm trying to connect people together through our differences in some ways, like this idea that, that hotel looked exactly like a hotel you'd find here. It was very kind of decadent, very gilded, very old school Dubai. And it was just amazing that it was in it was in Atami in Japan, which is a very sleepy old town in Japan. It used to be kind of like the hip kind of resort to go to during the weekends. And then all of a sudden, as things go up, things go down. So it was abandoned for many years, and they've used it as an artist hub. So I documented, I thought that from there I can connect other cities, and so London is very close to my heart.
So the shoot you did right now in London, is that London, the same show?
Yes, it's for the upcoming show, but it's a show. It's a project that's going to keep growing. But for now, it's London, Bath, Dubai, Sharjah, Abu Dhabi, Ras Al Khaimah. So I'm like all around, discovering new places. Honestly, it's.
So you gave me a couple of photos, that we're exhibiting here. Can you talk about any one of them and what it means to you?
These are all a variation, really. This is a QA2.
That's the QA2.
I love it. I just did another shoot there recently. I document all around town. So I'm always with my camera. So sometimes it's for projects, sometimes it's just for personal, this is the I need to photograph something that I see. Because not every space that I see means that I'll photograph it. You have to kind of feel it as well. There's a sense of connection that you form between spaces, and I take a lot. And I was working with 4 women this summer. And they saw that, they were like, finally we understand, it's not just a click of a button. I'm like, no, it's not. There's so much to go with taking a photo, and even composing it, framing it, and making sure that you have that connection. It takes me a good half hour just to set up. And then decide on whether it's worth taking that shot or not, especially because I work with film and it's so limited, I don't want to be wasting it on just random shots.
Yeah.
So I carry my camera with me when I travel. This is a family house in Ajman. This is my old house. This is a balcony that my mother created. This is my husband's old, what's it called? Their beach house in Fujairah, but the furniture is really kind of very ornate, very, very old school.
Very old.
It's very old school, and
that's very Titanic to me.
I love it. It is. The QE2 is something else altogether. And all these spaces that I visited, they each have their own kind of aura and energy. And there's not one that sticks out because, this is a police compound that I found 20 years ago. And I just walked in. Now you can't just walk into a space. There are so many restrictions. Back in the day, I just put on my backpack and I just go through wherever compound I find, any communities. I never get stopped.
So it's really
I've even been to an abandoned hospital with a friend.
It's clearly what you relate to.
Yeah.
It's so personal. Because in one of your interviews, I think it was for Harper's Bazaar or something, you said it takes a village to create art.
Yes.
But I think your relationship with these places is so something that is just between you and the place and your connection to it. So how does that fit in to your sort of narrative?
For me, it's like I need people to assist me. So there's that. There's the people, the printers. I work with a printer in London. So I've developed a long 20-year relationship with them. If it wasn't for them, I won't be able, I can't go back and forth printing. So I depend on them for printing. And then I depend on my friends. We have conversations constantly. My friends are all creatives in very different fields. So we always gather around, and sometimes, you have these conversations and then a light bulb moment and you're like, oh my God, and then getting permits and getting people to help you get the permits and things like that. So I don't believe it's a one-man job. I do believe that there are other people, other entities and people that need to be recognized. And that's why I say takes a village to create art.
Yeah.
Because it's so true.
And now let's talk about what's happening at the Louvre next week. The show is called Awakenings, and it's a bit of a departure from your normal medium.
Very different.
I'm trying to ask you about, and I still haven't seen anything. So I think Lamya is going to be working with sculpture. Am I correct? The first time?
Yeah, I have a sculpture that's coming.
Can you talk to everyone about it?
Okay.
A little bit. Whatever.
I will. So it's a sculpture I'd done this curating program prior, and I wanted to explore the idea of sand, and sand being very much part of where I'm from and the root of it, and this idea that a grain of sand carries with it many stories. So I remember years ago someone told me that Dubai is just a big sandbox, right? And I thought I can use that statement and turn it into something beautiful. So I'm creating a sculpture from sand that kind of embodies everything I feel about, I'm here, I'm not apologetic, it's a provocative piece in a certain way, but it really does stem from a place of, I'll work with what I have, be it negative or positive, and I want to create something that I resonate with, that embodies me, that embodies my culture, that embodies my home, and so that's how it came to be, and should be unveiled next week. Hopefully, we're still setting it up.
It's really, I think all of these themes are really sort of complex and they're sort of deep, because they're very at the core of who you are. How do you navigate these themes?
Well, some themes, the theme that I'm working with for Sharjah, for example, is basically I'm using the Qibla, the direction of Mecca, as kind of an anchor for my work. I'm not going to say a lot. Hopefully you guys can come see the show. And we're integrating another element into the space. So I've had that idea, I think 15 years ago, but I don't think it was the right time for it. I just left it. And I think it ruminated with time. Once I've reached that point where I'm a lot more kind of grounded. I'm a lot more confident in who I am. The project came about, and I just always believe that when things are meant to be, everything flows so much easier. And yeah, it just took 15 years to get there, but it's always an idea. And for me, the fulfillment comes from the process rather than the end product. So once I'm done with the project, I'm like, okay, and then I wait for the next idea to come up. But I also spent a good 2 years of not doing any photography or art. I completely went off the grid because I felt that as with everyone, we go through these life changes and we question who we are and what we do and whether this is what we're meant to do. So it's also good to take a step back and just kind of like completely shut off from, and just, allow yourself to kind of be in the moment. And then, ideas don't come under pressure. It's not like diamonds,
Yeah.
Ideas need time, and they need a clear head and they need a clear vision and they need a clear headspace, So I could be driving and I could have an idea, right? And it could be the simplest idea, but I wasn't able to see it once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And the role of art in public spaces, that you have such a big role in. What are your thoughts of this, especially of the future of the UAE, where cultural exchange is so vital, with this vibrant community that we have now?
Okay, so when I joined my gallery back in 2007, that was the boom of the art scene. I mean, there was an art scene here, obviously, and a lot of credible figures who've, paved the way for us. But I felt like it was an explosion. I don't know if anyone remembers that. Like, there was Art Dubai happening, and there were all these other events, and things were popping up left and right. There was this huge interest in Middle Eastern art, and all of a sudden, you're in the limelight, And I remember an artist told me once, he's like, enjoy it, because you only get 6 months worth of this is your 6 months. Basically, he's given me a time limit, because there's a high and there's a low, so you have to be prepared for that. And I think it's kind of true. If you go in with the intention of wanting instant fame, then it really does kind of, it does hinder your work, because the work should stem from a place of, love and fulfillment and passion, not for sake of, just because, I want to, I want to, it's not just, it is for the masses, but the essential part of it is that it's for you. So I did a lot of cultural exchange programs. I did workshops. I even taught at university. This idea of art is still quite new per se, because a lot of people aren't educated in the fields, and so they kind of they merge everything together in one big loop, like a lump of everyone's an artist, and so like I said, it's loosely used these days. Whereas I've been doing it for 20 years, in order for you to be a credible artist, and in order for collectors to be interested, you need to have kind of a resume of, first of all, progress, commitment to the work, diligence. They need to see your identity shine through the work. So if they look at something, they know that that's yours instantly without even having to read a label or a caption, Where, there are artists now that they'll come up to me and say, how can I make something that people will buy? And that's, for me, it's like a big faux pas. That in itself says nothing about you as an artist.
Right.
I mean, commercially, yes, you can create things on the side, but as an artist, you want it to be deeper than that. It shouldn't just be, because someone else likes it, so I'm going to create it, or copying someone just because they managed to do it,
So I guess if your work has garnered so much international acclaim, but even if it hadn't, you'd still be doing what you do.
100%. I am very much an antisocial person. I'm a homebody. I'd rather be home than attending shows and I live so far away. That's a great excuse for everything.
Yeah.
But in general, I'd much rather be home. And like I said, for me, the journey is the part where I feel so fulfilled. I was so lucky that I worked with 4 very different women this summer. All of them are friends.
Talk about sisterhood.
Yeah. It's honestly, when you have the right energy and the right kind of people around you, it really does, it kind of adds that extra incentive and the drive, So I had a friend of mine came from Montreal. She was a wedding photographer. My other friend is, she was a teacher / digital artist. Another friend is a graphic designer. Another friend is an interior designer. Another person was a creative salesperson. So
that's incredible.
But it's amazing, and we all come together, and in the end, they understood my vision better than I did, and sisterhood is very important.
So many perspectives, right?
Yeah, and it's also good to kind of bounce ideas off each other, and it's there's no kind of bitterness, there's no resentment, there's no jealousy, there's just support, which, I think is very important in an art community.
Yeah. I think my final question is really about us as parents. And, we have so many, I think every child, every human being has some creative instinct, right? Because we are human beings and we're here to create. And I remember growing up, and I think all of us to some extent, the thing was when you used to color, you'd color inside the lines. The teachers would say, color inside the line, don't color outside the lines. And now we're living in a world where we're constantly telling our kids to think outside the box, when we've asked them to constantly work within a box. So what is your advice to parents and to little kids, to your children? Because you can't be one way and then expect to become something else.
I have an example for it, because I did a workshop for mummies in my school, and I asked them all to come in with photos and things that mean something to them, and we all wrote words down. We did a bit of meditation in the beginning, and then we did a mixed media collage. And I was like, the idea is, so we started with 20 seconds of them just scribbling on the canvas, and that would be kind of like the base of their collage and the base of what they're creating. And I remember one of the moms was like, I haven't picked up a paintbrush or a pencil and drawing pencil since I was 8 years old, because my teacher told me, she basically reprimanded me and told me in front of all the class that I was really bad. So she had this kind of, it was like almost like a post-traumatic stress. And and then she was so happy that she went back and did the same project with her kids. So for me, it's like, the idea is that if you feel like you want to create, just go ahead and create. I've had people create projects on their phones. I've had people create things from just scrapbooks. People that, there's no limit. I mean, the whole thing is personal. So it needs to be authentic, coming from a place of truth, right? So if you feel like you want to just grab paints and just use your hair as a brush or use whatever, then go ahead and do that. Sometimes we just want to go a bit crazy. There's no reason why we should be following guidelines when it comes to, in general, not just art. I think, we're always conditioned to be a certain way. And as we grow older, the unconditioning starts to happen. And then you realize, wait a minute, I no longer want to do it this way. I want to...
You want to do it my way?
Yeah, I've had people who used photocopy machines to create art. So really, there are no limits to creating. And art isn't just sculptures or paintings or what, it's a lot more than that.
Yeah.
So I think, have fun with it.
Excellent. We're happy to, Lamya, you good to answer any questions that anybody has?
You've been an artist for 15, 20 years. Have you ever hit a creative block? And if so, how do you try and overcome that?
I did actually. I spent 2 years I had a business on the side that I set up with my sisters, and I just completely dedicated myself to that, and I switched off that part of myself completely. I was even considering donating all my cameras and equipment. I'm glad I didn't, because I went through a stage of uncertainty, and I was, again, this idea of, I think I was seeking external validation. So the idea that no one understood what I was doing, it was going somewhere but not going nowhere at the same time. I really did take a step back. And I remember my photography instructor told me once that he had destroyed all his prints when he went through it was like like going through your own dark night of the soul journey, and he had to start afresh. So for me, it was just 2 years of not carrying a camera. I wasn't buying any film. I wasn't painting. I wasn't drawing. I just cut off. And then eventually, with time, I kind of found myself back. So I think it's important that you can't expect ideas to come out of a place of desperation. It should always be a place of authenticity. And that's something I taught my students as well at the university was, I asked them to create a self-portrait. Then I was like, just use everything other than your face. And this girl came up with taking pictures of her hair because she had curly hair, and that was what people saw in her. And so her whole self-portrait was a book about hair during a wedding, curly hair, straight hair. And I loved that, the idea is that, you can be more. You can explore other areas, but definitely taking a hiatus is important. Definitely.
Hi. In terms of education, what are your thoughts on if a person feels creative but has a limitation to spend the time to get educated on the matter? What would you say? How important is getting an education in a creative field, or is it just a matter of creating?
You mean in terms of taking up courses and things like that?
Yeah, whether it's courses or or university or
I think education comes in all forms. Like for me, it's attending talks or sometimes attending shows. I think the moment you engage with other people, you connect on a different level. Then you start. I don't think education has to be limited to a book. It can go beyond that. Even travel is an education. I usually go online as well. I mean, I love YouTube. So if there's something I want to learn, even when it comes to fixing my camera, if it's 5-10 minutes of my day that I spend, and it's another piece of information that I've gained, And like I said, if you have a network of people that support you, it's always great to bounce ideas off each other. Me and my friends are constantly, like, even when we go on our little staycations, we always grab our notebooks with us and our Polaroid camera, and we just kind of create these little arts and craft like projects for ourselves where we can, just because we're adults doesn't mean we can't enjoy a good arts and craft session, So we try and engage as much as we can creatively, but still have fun and still, the idea is not to pressure yourself. And like I said, if you feel the urge to just grab a canvas and paint and you have no idea just go ahead and paint, just base it on your emotions at first. And through that process, you'll know, because it's always, the first steps gets momentum, gets you running. As we say in Arabic, al-haraka baraka, the more you move, the more blessed, your steps are. So I always believe in that,
It's fear, isn't it? Because you said all your work is fear, but it's about overcoming the fear, going, what am I going to do on that canvas, isn't it?
It's like that, and especially like now that I've taken my work out of the context of the UAE, just communicating with other entities and the language that I have to, it really is, you're always in fear of someone rejecting you, right? But then what's the worst that could happen? They say no, right?
Yeah.
So for me, the fear just means that you have passion. And if there's fear, then you should definitely do it. That's my key thing.
Any other questions?
How best do you feel that people can find out about like art happenings in the Dubai area and just engaging, in the artist community more? Like, what do you recommend?
In terms of like knowing where time out, and there are always things posted online on Instagram. I mean, I'm one of those people that no longer, reads, but I find that everything's so accessible online. Like you find out about a show, and then especially like this part of town is so active creatively. There's always something happening, especially during Art Week, during Art Dubai, during Art Abu Dhabi. There's always little workshops happening on the side. There's always talks, artist tours. There's an art bus that takes people around. So I think once you get into the right platforms, then they can kind of educate you in terms of what's happening next. And most galleries have at least 2-3 shows a year. And a lot of galleries also have workshops as well. So let's say Sarkal Avenue is just like a hub, right? A creative hub. So you have galleries, you have printers, you've got different creative, entities. So I think just staying connected to that kind of a vibe and going from, and just like I said, following the right platforms and, how Instagram is, you follow one and then you end up with like, what is it called? The algorithm just kind of like starts suggesting other venues to you as well. Oh, you quit Instagram.
That's amazing.
Good for you. I did it for a year. It was very refreshing, actually. Very good. But going back to work now, I've learned to assign a limit for myself. So my whole platform is purely my work and my writing. And it's more to do with that than personal things. So I think if you're, I took a year hiatus from Instagram, but I came back knowing that I was able to control my whims. I could control what it is, how long I can be because now I know it's purely for my work and purely as a creative outlet, really. That's what I use it for.
When I look at your work, you often have this back and side light that captures like a still moment in a flow of life. but how much is spontaneous and how much has been prepared and staged by you to come to that picture?
In general, I photograph things as they are, so I love using natural light. But recently, I've started to integrate elements into my space as a form of interruption. So that's the staging part of it. But as the space itself, I like to keep things, like at one point someone's like, there's a vacuum cleaner in the back. I'm like, just leave it, leave it, you know? I like the idea of what people leave behind because there's always a story there. There's, you know, every detail in a space counts as it adds to the story. So you can change the narrative of a space by just shooting it from a different angle, shooting it from a different direction, shooting it with different lights, or you know, by adding a red shoe in there, you've already changed, you know. So I love this idea that you can play around with the way the message is conducted through just something as simple as an angle shot or but I do integrate I mean, with my hotel project, I put my family photos in all these budget hotels, my mom, my dad, my brother, my grandmother. So when people look at them from the outside, people assume that they're just normal bedrooms. And then once they see the label, then obviously the stereotypes come into play and people's perception changes. So it's interesting to see how space, the language of space can be altered based on what's in and what you take out. So, but most cases, a lot of the documentation, if it's just archival, I like them as they are.
Is there any dream project or any place in particular that you've been wanting to shoot for a really long time?
This project that I'm working on actually has been a dream project. It's 15 years in the making, but 15 years in the making up here. It just, it's taken a lot out of me, to be honest, not just physically and mentally, but the idea that, you know, stepping out of my comfort zone. I wish I could say more about it, but it's a really beautiful project.
We have to go and see.
It's, you know, it's again, this idea that I've reached myself in some ways. I am who I am. I've reached a point where I'm very comfortable being who I am. I'm no longer because back in the day, I used to be very apologetic about where I came from. I wouldn't want people to ask me. I wanted to just kind of blend in. So whenever people ask me where I'm from, the assumptions start to come up and perceptions and stereotypes. And I'm one of those very highly sensitive people that just takes a step back, and I take in all these energies. And now I've gotten to a point where I'm able to kind of what's the word?
Distance
myself. And I think the project's come back only because I've reached that point of clarity and confidence. And so this project, it's called Kun, which in Arabic means to be or being. And it's basically the idea that it talks about human vulnerability and acceptance. And God says Kun, which means God says, if I want, it's a command. If I want something to be, then it will be. So this idea of letting go completely. So this whole thing is about letting go of human transience and kind of like this idea of a spiritual yearning in space and connecting people through spaces. So I hope you guys can get to see the work. It's coming up. It's a solo show at Maraya on the 13th of October, hopefully.
That's in Sharjah.
Sharjah, yeah.
So there's one in Sharjah on the 13th of October. There's the Awakenings at the Louvre that starts on the 15th of September.
The 19th, but the 20th is open to the public.
20th is open to the public. Thank you so much, Lamya. Thank you for vulnerability. Thank you for surrender.
I'm sorry that I keep staring at you.
No worries.
I'm very uncomfortable when I'm talking. One of the people that doesn't do public speaking.
It's all good.
But thank you for having me.
Everybody, we have some announcements to make. We have a separate Instagram account now for the SIG Learning Series. We will be sending you details. We have a website that is going to host all the SIG Learning Series content on YouTube, on Spotify, on video, for anyone that wants to catch up on talks that have happened and talks that will happen in the future. Thank you all for coming, and thank you so much.